Tomistoma. Or is it the false gharial? Or the sundagharial? Or do we just call it Tomistoma? I'll circle back to that in a bit. So first, let's just give some background on the species. It is a fairly decently sized, long, narrow-snouted crocodilian from Southeast Asia, Indonesia, that area. And historically, they ranged across Vietnam and the low-lying areas of Thailand, but are probably extirpated from there at the moment. And even now, today, their range in the island of Sumatra has been drastically shrunk. Now, to give a rough description of them, their coloration looks a lot like Paleosuchus, the dwarf caimans, oddly enough. Where it's a lot of like reddish-brown colorations with darker blotches and patches and stuff like that. Now, there are a few interesting and weird tidbits about them. For example, they actually hold the record for the largest egg out of any crocodilian. Strangely enough, you'd think it'd be a salty, but no, it's Tomistoma. And then also, out of all the large crocodilian skulls, they have the most, in fact, big skulls preserved. In fact, the largest crocodilian skull that we have is of a Tomistoma. Okay, now it's time to circle back to what I started off with. Why am I calling it Tomistoma and not some random common name in English? Well, that has to do with everyone's favorite subject, phylogeny, taxonomy, and classification, and all that jazz. You see, for the longest time, Tomistoma was classified as a crocodile. Specifically, the skull, especially the part where the jaws widen out as you get closer to the head. Whereas in gharials, it's a very slender tube until you wait till you get to the skull, the main part of the skull, and just goes straight out. But then came the advent of genetic technology, and scientists were able to do genetic analysis of the species, and lo and behold, look at it. Look at the genetics. It's actually more closely related to gharials. In fact, there's a few other things about gharial's classification that this genetic analysis revealed. You see, for the longest time, the classification for crocodilians was this, with alligators and crocodiles being more closely related to each other than they are to gharials. However, this genetic study actually showed a complete change. What it showed was crocodiles and gharials being more closely related to each other, and alligators being on their own weird little branch, all the way out here by themselves. Alright, I'm just getting tired of this. So, alligators and crocodiles used to be put together in this false group called Brevirostrans, which literally translates as broad snouts, because, compared to a gharial, anyone's snout's broader than that. I mean, I think my snout's probably broader than a gharial's. Well, with that study, that Brevirostran clade got thrown out, and a new one erected called Longirostrans, literally long snout, which now comprises the crocodiles and the gharials. Yeah, so now you see why there's so much confusion about their name. For the longest time, it was a false gharial because it was actually a crocodile that just happened to look like a gharial. Well, turns out it actually is a gharial, so what do we call it? Do we still call him the false gharial, or do we go by more accurate sundagharial? And there's still some people who would argue that it might still be a gharial, maybe. Some people are not fully sold on the whole genomic argument versus morphological argument. I personally believe more in the genetic side of it. So that's why everyone just calls it Tomistoma. Simple. There. We all know it's its own weird, unique thing outside of any other crocodilian genus, so Tomistoma seems to fit. Now, Tomistoma today consists of only one extant species, Tomistoma schlegeli. However, in the past, it used to be a much more widespread species, ranging all across southern Asia into Europe and Africa. And they used to have specimens assigned from all the way back to the Eocene to this species. However, that's probably its own unique genus outside of Tomistoma. However, it's in the greater Tomistomene clade. And Tomistomenes used to be a lot more widespread outside of Southeast Asia. Used to be found on the Pacific coast of California, weirdly enough. Now, the species name Schlegeli, which is the current extant species, is named after the very prominent 19th century German naturalist Hermann Schlegel. I'll probably do a video about him someday. I'm thinking of doing a video series about historical figures in herpetology. Stay tuned. Yeah. What the genus name Tomistoma actually means is sharp mouth. Tome, or Tom or Tommy, means sharp, and stoma means mouth. Easy enough. So, why is this species so heavily threatened? Well, mainly due to habitat loss nowadays. You see, in Southeast Asia, just like about anywhere else in the world, the first type of habitat that gets cleared out and destroyed is low-lying wetlands. And that's where Tomistomas live. They mostly live in like peat bogs and low-lying swamp forests and stuff like that. So these areas, which have seen a massive increase in the local human population, has seen a massive clearance of these areas. So Tomistoma, it actually separates its habitat choice out away from the other crocodilian that lives in the same area, the salty. Salties obviously live in saltwater habitats and coastal mangroves, forests, and stuff like that. So Tomistoma's habitat is the one getting eliminated. I mean, granted, salties are also getting eliminated as well, but not quite as much as Tomistomas do. Now, in their native range, Tomistomas are arguably the apex predator in their preferred habitats. Now, it was once widely thought, and it still is kind of true, that since it has a very long, thin snout, which is more commonly associated with smaller fish-eating species, that Tomistomas mostly feed on small prey, small fish, and stuff like that. However, there's been plenty of observations of them taking down larger prey, like monkeys and deers. There's even a report of them one attacking a cow once, believe it or not. And unfortunately, there have been a few human fatalities caused by this species. However, compared to its neighbor, the salty, is way less aggressive towards humans than those guys are. So in conclusion, Tomistoma is the last relic of a once great and widespread branch of the crocodilian family tree. And its confusing taxonomic history has led to his scientific name actually replacing his common name in common parlance, almost to the level of, say, dinosaur names. And on top of that, its possession of many unique features, big eggs, along with being just an outright beautiful species, its loss would be really a tragedy for us and our descendants. Before I end the video, I want to give a shout out to Chris Dieter of Crocodile Encounter for letting me get in there and film some of the Tomistoma footage you got to see today. He runs a top tier zoo and is hopefully soon going to have a Tomistoma captive breeding program up and running. So if you guys are ever in the greater Houston area, you should definitely check him out. I guarantee you it is one of the best zoos you'll ever visit. Alright, until next time, thanks.